Welcome everybody to this talk today. This is a talk about the exterior, so obviously something about that has drawn you in, so hopefully we're going to explore some interesting ideas about it today. This is part of the British Acupuncture Council and RCHM's Let's Talk About Herbal Medicine series. You use this picture here of two trees with combined roots because I think that actually there's a huge amount of crossover between the British Acupuncture and RCHM, not least me. I'm a member of both organizations, very happy member. We share quite a lot. We share quite a lot of members. There are 120 dual members of the RCHM and BACC, which in the RCHM we're very grateful for, because that's 120 people, paying two sets of fees, and they don't have to, because they believe really, I think, in the things that are below. They believe in our shared values. I think that we have a lot of shared values between the BACC and the RCHM. We believe in standards. We believe that we want to be a professional, kind of forward-looking, future-looking profession that's taking responsibility for actually creating a vision for the future and achieving things not just for us, but I think to keep that flame burning for Chinese medicine in general. We want to provide a good future for everyone who comes after us as well. And I think that this is something that the BACC and the RCHM really share. Obviously, we've worked together before as well, quite a lot. Recently, we worked together a lot during the COVID response, which is really, really helpful to share our resources at that point, come together as a community. So some of you may know I'm the president of the RCHM, and it's been about 3 years now, I've been president. And one thing that I think, I kind of tried to think about what we need in general going forward. And something keeps coming back to me. And I think that's just the idea of, pulling together and working together is something that can be really key. And it's a great feeling, to be honest, when the British Acupuncture Council and RCHM get together, because we've shown that we can achieve quite a lot together. And, we can achieve much more than we can independently. So that's something that's really great. What is this Let's Talk About series? Well, as I said, half of the RCHM members are BACC members. And so to some extent, I'm representing that constituency, that roughly 5% of the BACC membership. But at the same time, I think that there's something that the RCHM has to bring to the whole conversation of herbal medicine and Chinese medicine in general. So just to be clear, I'm a very proud acupuncturist as well as herbalist. I don't really see one as being the main thing that I do. I very much believe that you can focus on one therapy, one skill, and be absolutely fantastic and treat a lot of people. I've seen too many amazing acupuncturists that just stun me. And I want to emulate. So this isn't a couple of talks that are going to try and convince you to study herbal medicine. What we want to do is just tell you our stories and kind of communicate what it's like to study herbs, what we've learned. If that inspires you, that's great. But in the end, I genuinely believe that, if you're someone who's going to do herbs, you'll find it. You'll find that path. So today is really an exploration of how looking at one particular idea from different therapies can kind of give you a bit more information, and that can actually feed back into your original therapy. So in this case, we're looking at something that I first came across when studying acupuncture. And then after lots of other modalities, herbs, qigong, and acupressure, dietary therapy, it all started to become a little bit more illuminated, which then enhanced my acupuncture. So even if you're not interested in studying herbal medicine, this will be a very useful talk. But if you are interested in studying herbal medicine, you will really kind of get an insight into some of the ways that the herbal medicine theory thinks. And it will kind of open up some more ideas about the concepts that you're already aware of. If herbs is something that you are thinking about studying, then the next webinar, which is on Wednesday, March 29th, is really for you, because there's 4 of us. Connie, who's just stepped down as being CEO of the RCHM, but she's an RCHM member. Helen, who's also a RCHM council member. Charlie Buck, as many people will know, will be there too, and I will be there. And we're going to all talk about different phases of practice. So Connie will talk about training to be a herbalist. I'll talk about what happens when you entered the RCHM. Helen will talk about what it's like to be a new practitioner. And Charlie will be talking, looking back across a career as a herbalist. So it will really give you an idea, a vision of, the lifespan of a herbalist, and give you a window into, some of the issues that brings up. It will answer some of your questions, and it will also, give you an idea of how to avoid some of the pitfalls and actually get the most out of that step that you might take. Great. So back to this talk, just a little bit of an introduction about me. Some of you may know that I really got interested in Chinese medicine when I was living in Taiwan studying Mandarin Chinese. This was over 20 years ago. And this is the town, and on the right is the language center where I studied. It has a nice, beautiful lake outside. And I met a brilliant Chinese doctor, and he actually not only had a Chinese medicine clinic where he practiced herbs and acupuncture and Tuina, but he also had, at that point, decided to open a restaurant. And this restaurant, very special. It was tailored towards the seasons, and particularly the 24 solar terms, or 24 2-week mini seasons, and the menus would change every 2 weeks. So this was really kind of a dazzling look at Chinese medicine. He's a brilliant practitioner, and my drive really in my career has been to try and learn with him properly and trying to figure things out, because he's someone who really is very fluid across the different therapies. That's one of the reasons that drove me to want to learn the different therapies, so that I can start to try and figure out what he's doing. So as I said, I started studying Chinese, then I did my acupuncture course, then my Tuina course, then my herbs, and then about 5 years ago, I qualified as a Qigong and Tai Chi teacher as well. So that's all in my wheelhouse. And all through that time, I've kind of been building my dietary therapy and yang sheng knowledge. Some of you know that I taught a full 10-day course on yang sheng to practitioners last year, but I've also been teaching yang sheng and self-help to the public for about 10 years. So on to today's topic, treating the exterior or releasing the exterior. Many of us first come across this concept when we look at in our acupuncture textbook. Most famous point probably is large intestine 4. And we look at those actions, and it says, regulates the defensive qi and adjusts sweating, expels wind, and releases the exterior. And I don't know about you, but the first time I saw the word release with the word exterior, it felt like a very odd couple of words to put together. And I was wondering, what does that actually mean? It led to a lot of questions. What is an exterior, and how might you release it? And why would you want to release the exterior? Surely the exterior is there for a good reason. So it's always been an interesting question to me. And through my clinical career, and also just experiencing things in life and in Taiwan, in Chinese culture, I've come across, it's started to unravel this concept, and I'm going to take you on a journey with me. It will be a tour of this concept from different perspectives, and how learning multiple things can illuminate the concept, but obviously focusing a lot on herbal medicine and dietary therapy, because herbal medicine and dietary therapy really stem from the same source in terms of their ways of thinking. They both talk about the temperature, we say nature of a herb, so whether it's warming or cooling, and the flavor, so salty, sour, sweet, spicy, bitter. So those are core to both dietary therapy and to herbs. So that's what we'll see. So hopefully I want to communicate some of the joy of this journey too, because if anything that herbs has brought to my life, yes, you'd expect me to say it absolutely does. I get fantastic results, and I'm really, really happy with it. And it works very well for me on business level, on a clinical level, a patient level. All of that stuff is absolutely true. But it also has brought a huge amount of joy in my life. And, you know, I've got herbs in my clinic, but I've also got a whole pile of herbs at home that I can play around with. And it's just a really joyful kind of interaction with the medicine. So basically today, we're going to start laying a little bit of the groundwork of what is the exterior, focusing on what is it as a kind of a territory and what is it as a function. I use that word territory deliberately because actually there are many doctors who do talk about the exterior in military terms, which is quite interesting. And then looking at the function of it, and then we're going to have a tour through different perspectives, through herbal medicine, dietary therapy, qigong, acupressure, and then we're going to come back to acupuncture. So wait till the end for the acupuncture. So this is where I kind of, after my initial training, and I never know if my deficiencies in acupuncture, you know, they probably mostly come from me not paying attention to the teachers who did explain all this stuff to begin with. But anyway, this is what was in my mind after I did my acupuncture degree. It was that the exterior is somewhat related to colds and flus. It can open and close. It's related to the lung. It has something to do with these kind of mysterious soli, these things that can open and close in the exterior. It's related to sweating, and it's on the surface of the body. I'm not exactly sure where it is, because, I mean, is it inside? Is it outside? I'm not really sure. It's also one of the 8 principles. We learn the 8 principles: exterior, interior, deficiency, excess, cold, heat, yin and yang. And again, I don't know about you, but the first time I heard about the 8 principles, I was just very underwhelmed by them. It was like, well, big deal. Yeah, I know that. That's all there already. Suddenly later, I realized that the 8 principles is incredibly profound. And when you really understand what you're talking about, differentiating that, it can, and actually today you will get a little bit of a flavor of that. Just to let you know, I should have said this at the beginning, but if you've got any questions at any time, just drop them in the chat. I'll probably wait till the end to answer them, but there will be opportunity at the end to answer any questions as well. So let's start with the territory of the exterior. And today, by the way, I'm not going to tell you, a lot of people have disagreements about these things, and I'm not going to resolve any disagreements. I'm just going to kind of literally lay out the territory. I'm going to say, look, these are things that people tend to talk about the exterior, and throughout this whole lecture today, I'm not really taking a position on anything. I just want to really give you some nice ideas, and there will be some practical things you can take away today, and you can use straight away as well. So here's a beautiful passage in the Neijing. I love this passage. It's chapter 64 of the Neijing, and it talks about the flow of qi within the different seasons. And anyone who's done any of the yang sheng work with me will know that, and you may know this already, that the flow of qi goes more superficial in the summer and deeper in the winter. And so this actually gives you an idea already of what the Neijing thinks is the exterior and what it thinks is the interior from this perspective. By the way, there are different perspectives and different definitions of exterior and interior. So in spring, the qi is in the Jingmai. So spring. So if you think of winter as being internal and summer as being external, then spring is the journey from internal to external. So Jingmai, that's the primary channels. That is somewhere in between. Okay, somewhere in between the most external and the most internal. Summer, the chi is in the sun law, which are the tiny little blood vessels. Some people say that's the capillaries, right? So that's the kind of microcirculation right at the surface. In late summer, the chi is in the muscles and the flesh. So now it's going kind of deeper. But remember, late summer is also related to the spleen, and spleen is very related to muscles and the flesh as well. In autumn, the chi is in the skin. Of course, lung regulates the skin. And really, autumn is all about closing back down. So this idea of the skin and the soul closing back down. And then in winter, the chi is in the bones and the marrow. And I think that we would all agree that at least the marrow is pretty internal, right? So here's some other quotes here. A lot of people miss these second bits of the quotes, which are beautiful. In spring, the chi of heaven begins to disperse into the open. The chi of the earth begins to flow out. What is frozen breaks open, the ice melts, the water flows, and the jing are passable. That's the primary channel of jing here. Hence, the human chi is in the mai. So what you'll see here is that they, in the Neijing, effortlessly blends the things that are happening in nature into things that are happening in the body. So at the same time as the weather is getting slightly warmer and the frozen rivers are starting to unfreeze and they're starting to flow, that's happening also within our own channels. And as they're beginning to unfreeze and open, more and more flow is coming into them and more flow is going to the exterior. In summer, the jing are full and the chi overflows. So there's this idea that at a certain point, the jing law, the primary channels, overflow. And where do they go when they overflow? They go into the capillaries, which receive the blood. And it says the skin is filled and replete, or filled in excess. So again, fascinating, this idea that, okay, well, these primary meridians are things that can fill. And if they fill, then they go towards the exterior. We're filling with chi, right? So there's some idea that something can fill up and go outwards, or it can kind of empty down inwards. And that's kind of, again, something that's interesting to know. In late summer, the jing law are brimming internally and overflow into the flesh and muscles. So even more abundance by late summer. And then in autumn, it says, look, now we're going the other way. The chi of heaven begins to contract and the solia are obstructed and the skin is pulled together tightly. So things are closing now, closing in and closing back down and going back inwards. And then in winter, everything is covered and stored away. You know, this is very much like the metaphor of hibernation. Blood and chi are in the center. They are attached to the bones and the marrow internally and penetrate the 5 zhang. So the zhang are also inside. They're also an interior thing compared to the meridians, for example. So this is a little diagram that I made, which just represents that in a very crude way. So in summer, the yang fluids are on the exterior and the toli are more open. In winter, the yang fluids are on the interior and the toli are more closed. Well, by the way, some people, and I used to do this, would say the toli are the pores. I think they're related to the pores, but I did actually kind of look into this a bit. And my understanding is that pores themselves cannot close and open, apparently. If someone understands this better than me, I'd like someone to explain it. But there is something that clearly opens and closes. And I think it's a whole sequence of things. The science is a bit complicated to me, but something does open and close. Sometimes they call it the toli, they call it the fenrou zhijian, which is what it's being explained to me is where the white and red flesh meet. So there's a meeting point where something can open and something can close. And obviously, as we know, there are things that can make us sweat and things that can kind of stop that sweat. So the zones, the typical zones we're thinking about. Well, what we're really talking about is yang areas, right? And again, I'm not going to resolve all the discussions and disputes about what is the exterior and what isn't. I'm just going to give you some ideas, you know, that I find in texts, that I find in practice, find in my own qigong work, for example. But clearly, the most yang area is the head. It's where all the yang channels meet. It is it's the upper part, which is more yang. And so the upper part then will be more yang. So neck and shoulders and upper limbs are also a bit more yang. But the most yang part of the yang would be the back. So, and particularly the back of the head and the back of the neck. So an example of this, by the way, if you want to understand the yin being the front and the yang being the back, is the most natural thing we do to protect ourselves. And of course, when we are a fetus, is to go into the fetal position. And the fetal position, the yin area of the body is as contracted and defended as possible. And the yang area of the body is as open as possible. And the yang area of the body is the back. So everywhere that's exposed in the fetal position is really the very yang area. And everywhere that's kind of closed inward is a very yin area. But of course, if upper is yang and posterior is yang, then the back of the neck and the head will be the most yang place. And what is the classic wind cold symptoms? It's pain and tightness at the back of the head and neck. It's also where we release it. That's where you'll see that the most commonly indicated points to release the exterior are there. So we're looking, the exterior is the most yang area of the yang area, but there are lots of other associated areas. So we're also talking about depth. So it's also the more superficial area. So it include the body area, body hair, the skin, the totally down to the muscle to some extent, I would say. And again, there's lots of discussion of when the muscle gets involved in the exterior, but definitely. And we know that because we know, for example, cold, when it gets in, it can make the muscles contract, and that's often what causes the pain. Now, it's also the periphery. So we could say peripheral circulation, but we can also say the four limbs. Interestingly, I've heard some conceptions of the exterior which would actually include the bone, even though earlier on in the Neijing, it was mentioning bone was more interior. Well, certainly bone is more interior compared to the skin, no question. However, bones in the limbs, for example, in the periphery, they are more yang than bones, or more exterior than bones, than your rib cage, for example. So it's a lot of this kind of what's exterior, what's interior. Sometimes it can be relative. Sometimes, very often in the Neijing, for example, I've been reading some quotes which are really emphasizing the relative nature. But there are some things which are objectively exterior. So the skin layer is objectively exterior. The back of the head is objectively exterior. Now, what's interesting about this kind of idea of the four limbs being the exterior is, and again, this is something herbal medicine gives you, is that the word for limb in Chinese is zhi. And so if you look at the top here with this character with a cross at the top, and then it looks like a table underneath. Okay, so that is zhi. That if you put on the left of it, if you put the body radical, it means limb. However, if you look in the middle here, if you put the character for wood or tree on the left of it, it becomes branch. So really, there's this idea that branches and limbs are the same thing. And there's this idea of correspondence we're all very familiar with in Chinese medicine. And what's even more fascinating is zhi also means twig as well as branch. And when it's a twig or a branch in herbal medicine, it treats our twigs and branches, which are our arms and fingers, so our periphery. So literally, there's a direct relationship between this idea of the exterior, of branches on a tree, and then we can actually use that part of the plant to treat our branches. And as you'll see, cinnamon is very, very key when we're treating the exterior. Cinnamon's great to go to the exterior. And that's also why it's great for pain, but we'll come on to that in a moment. So what else? The yang areas. So you can also say the orifices of the head are yang areas to some degree. They're part of the exterior. And we can certainly release kind of trapped qi, because a lot of the meridians end in these orifices of the head, right? In the eyes, in the nostrils, in the ears. And certainly we know when people get cold symptoms, they get stuff there, right? And so somehow unblocking them can also be an unblocking of the exterior and can help things resolve. When I was writing these down, I was thinking, well, what about the mouth? Is that exterior or interior? Very interesting question, because the mouth is the upper part of the gastrointestinal tract, and actually really in herbal medicine, one of the most important distinctions is when we're talking about things that are in the gastrointestinal tract, we really start to see those as much more interior. So maybe mouth is an exception here, when orifices of the head. Possibly the skin around the mouth could be, but still that might be an expression of the interior, for example. But certainly the nostrils, the eyes, and the ears could be considered exterior. So again, we could talk for hours about meridians and go around and around about this. So I'm really just going to lightly touch on this because I want to get to some of the things that you don't know, right? So Tai Yang, Xiao Yang, Yang Ming are the three Yang meridians. Tai Yang's back, Xiao Yang's more side, Yang Ming is more front. Front is interesting because front is more of a yin thing, right? So it's yang within the yin, which is kind of interesting. And the Neijing at some point does actually talk about the stomach being exterior part to the interior part of the spleen. But I'm not going to go down that road. Let's just talk about things that we're really, really clear. Tai Yang is exterior. Xiao Yang is somewhere in the middle, and Yang Ming. But being Yang meridians, they all go to the heads. They all have, and Yang Ming, of course, also goes up the front of the face to the orifices. So there is definitely relationship of yang and exterior with all three of those. There's a question about the lung, which is very interesting. And I've been doing an advanced herbs course with Volker Scheid, who's a really great teacher and mentor of mine. I'm very lucky to have. And he was talking about how there's a lot of discussion of whether the lung was an interior or an exterior thing. Well, it's interior in the sense that it's in the inside of the body, and it's an interior Zhang organ. We already said Zhang things are interior. However, it's also permanently open to the outside, which is kind of interesting. It is a bit of the outside on the inside. So is the lung an exterior? Also, the function of the lung is very related to the exterior. In acupuncture, we can really regulate the exterior through lung points. You know, we know obviously lung 7 is a very key one. Large intestine 4 works by virtue of its being the yang aspect of the lung. So there's a lot of interesting things about where the lungs interior or exterior. We don't have to resolve that question. We can just keep it as an open thing in our minds. So, yeah, there's a lot of ideas about this being either relative. Is it a relative thing? So yang channels versus yin channels, channels versus organs, yang organs versus yin organs. Yes, so and those can be exterior or interior. What flows in the exterior? Well, you have, we hear about these things, the yin qi and the wei qi, the nutritive qi and the defensive qi. And as you go through the Neijing and you go through a lot of our textbooks, they'll talk about the flow of yin and wei, and how wei goes on the outside during the day, sinks into the body at night. So it's very crucial thinking about this for sleep. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of depth on this one because I want to get to something that's tangible that we can all sense and feel. And as I say, this has been a whistle stop up to this point. Is it too much information? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take things right back down to how I actually present this to the public, because I think it's really useful to teach the public about the exterior. Sometimes we can think, oh, this is some kind of advanced abstract concept in Chinese medicine. And I think hopefully after the end of this talk, you'll see that actually I think it's quite a kind of core thing. And the way that I talk about it, I think that you can get people to understand it quite well, at least for Chinese medicine self-help, which is a passion of mine. So this is the picture that I give to my patients about, I know you kind of talk about it in terms of immunity, that in a sense, we have the ability to warm ourselves internally, which we represent as this fire, right? And that can obviously is our yang qi. And then the pot, to some degree, you could say, is the metabolism, or the spleen and stomach, the fluids in the stomach. And when there is heat underneath the pot, right? So that means we have sufficient yang qi. What can happen, and we have enough fluid in the pot too, what can happen is that we create a cloud that steams out to the surrounding area of the body, which we could call the exterior. Again, we don't have to define it too much here, because we can define it in terms of experience. This idea of a protective warm cloud of steam at the level of the skin and the pores, this is the language I'm using to the public. We know that if we went around this room now and we asked everybody, do some people feel drafts and some people not feel drafts? There'll be a lot of different answers. We would hear that some people are hot all year round. Some people are too hot and can't sleep at night because of all the heat in the body. Some people are super cold all the time. Some people are sensitive to wind, which might, in Chinese medicine thinking, would be that actually the solia are permanently a bit too open. And the wind blows right through you, and you can easily feel uncomfortable if you're exposed to a draft. Some people are completely immune to that. That's something within our experience, and but the goal for us really, however we achieve it, whether it's through acupuncture or herbs, massage, or self-help through qigong and through dietary therapy, is to be able to kind of keep that fire burning inside without it dispersing and letting it all dissipate. Retain enough fluids on the inside too, right? So there's kind of a yin and yang thing, but also maintain this healthy glow. You could call it a glow, right? Around the body that keeps us nice and safe and protected. And that's one way of looking at the exterior. It's a way of looking at the exterior, which is kind of like a positive, ideal scenario with the exterior, rather than looking at only when we get to pathology. Because another thing I want to get to today is the exterior is something that we can be treating and thinking about and maintaining all the time. So when wind comes along, hopefully you don't feel too bad, because and in some senses, what we're talking about here is the upright qi, is the zheng qi, right? Or the correct qi, the opposite of which is the evil qi or pathogenic qi. So this is also the way that I kind of explain things to the public. Again, it's a bit crude. It's a lot cruder than what you find in the real highly detailed texts of Chinese medicine, but I think it's also helpful that when you're talking about colds and flus, the body can get exposed to a weather change, very often cold or wind, or an infection. So it's something that invades the body. In Chinese medicine, we often talk about invasion of wind cold, invasion of wind or cold, or a combination of the two. Later on in Chinese medicine and Chinese herbal medicine, they would talk more about wind heat and wind dryness. So as that invasion comes in, it kind of disorders this order within the exterior, and you get this hot qi that rushes upwards and outwards. It brings fluids to the exterior, this warm yang. The body sweats. The excess yang pressure is let out of the system. Some would say that the wind or cold evil is pushed out of the system, and then the yang qi can go back down again. So there's an idea of something coming up, coming out, pushing, this warmth pushing outwards. A release happens. Something might be pushed out or released. And then because it's pushed out and released, it can come back down again. And that should happen, but often things can go wrong. When things go wrong, well, we can have a sustained fever. We can get, our orifices can get all blocked up, as in the top right picture. Bottom right, we can have itching, skin conditions. This heat gets trapped in the exterior. And now you can have all sorts of rashes and nodules and things like that. In the middle, maybe your yang doesn't activate at all. Maybe you don't have a sufficient yang, so you just get really cold. Or the cold can be that the yang comes out to the exterior and activates, and because it's struggling with the pathogen, trying to fight the pathogen, there now isn't yang to warm the exterior, and that's another reason why you get cold. There's a lot of different reasons, explanations within Chinese medicine, but they all, to some extent, have validity, and they all do make sense. In the bottom, because the pressure builds up inside and doesn't release, sometimes you can get a huge amount of heat or pressure trapped inside, and that can cause irritability, for example, but it could also cause, for example, high blood pressure. So I'm hoping you're getting a picture of actually a lot of things can happen with trapped exterior, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a cold or flu. And the last picture, of course, you can get neck or head pain, or upper body pain in some way, or if it's really trapped and there's no sweat, you can get all over body aches. Well, that kind of, it answers some things, but a lot more questions come up. So questions relating to release. Is there more than one way to release the exterior? And should you tonify in an exterior condition? Kind of an interesting question there, because it's one thing to assist the body to release all of this that's going on, but if the reason why someone can't release the exterior is they're deficient, however, their symptoms are still a fever, if you put more qi into the system but it doesn't release, could you make it worse? For example, and that would be an acupuncture parlance, but if you were to, boost the system, or boost the fluids, or boost the yang in either modality, well, you should, at least the result should be the more releasing going on. Otherwise, it could actually make the pressure worse. There's an interesting question about tonifying, and I'm not fully going to resolve that one today. I'm going to talk more about excess conditions that where we can just think about how to release them quite simply. But we will talk a little bit about deficiency, the general idea of deficiency. When I answer this question, by the way, I came up with a little catchphrase called the exterior release chain. Okay, I did not invent this. I did not invent any of this knowledge. I put a little catchphrase on it. Okay, I just think this is an interesting idea that when I've been learning the herbal medicine, particularly, I realized that a lot of things have to go right for the exterior to release. And quite often when we're treating the exterior in herbal medicine, we're looking at the chain of things that should happen and working out what part of the chain isn't working and why, and correcting that part of the chain. So when you understand this whole chain, then you can understand how to treat it. And that's something that herbal medicine has definitely given me. And we will be talking about that. I'll give you an example of that with a formula, and then with dietary therapy. You can mimic it in dietary therapy. Sweating is an interesting one. Is making someone sweat the same as releasing the exterior? And are all methods of sweating equal? I mean, we sweat when we do exercise, right? So aren't we releasing our exterior when we do exercise? We might sweat when we go to a sauna. We might sweat when we go to a hot country. We might sweat when we're nervous. Is that releasing the exterior? Short answer is not necessarily. And as you'll see, half of, many of the formulas in the main text of herbal medicine, the Shanghan Lun, are treating the exterior when sweating is happening, but the exterior is in some way still disordered or trapped. So what do you do then? So now it's related to the exterior, certainly. And again, a little watchword that I came up with, or maybe I stole from someone who knows, was effective sweat, right? So this idea of what we want to have is a sweat that actually does the job, right? And sometimes even you may have a release and you don't feel a sweat. Some people say that there is a sweat happening, but it's so minute that you don't feel it. And some people will say, well, actually, you could kind of have a chi release when you don't actually have to sweat. So there's a lot of different things on the scale, but sweating is definitely related, and we'll go into that more. Is it limited to cold and flus? So I've mentioned pain and skin, for example. So can it be Can it be used to treat pain in the skin? Can it be applied to other illnesses? And I'm going to make the argument that actually almost any illness could potentially have some exterior involvement. And so we want to find a way to work out if there's something going on there. And could you release your exterior now and get a benefit? You're not ill right now. Is your exterior to some degree trapped? Is it always a bit trapped, right? And is there a way, maybe in a Yang Sheng self-help kind of continual way, that we can take care of our exterior every day? So we're going to answer some of these questions. So now we've read the foundation. We're going to go through some of the different treatment modalities, and we can start with Chinese herbs. So one of the things that has become really clear to me, and it's thanks to some fantastic teachers, and particularly, a lot of this came from studying the Shanghan Lun with great teacher Fran Turner, who really, this system's very, very clear about distinguishing between exterior and interior. It's actually very clear about distinguishing between the 8 principles, so exterior, interior, efficiency, excess, cold, heat, yin and yang. It's actually it's exclusively based around this text, the treatise on cold damage, Shanghan Lun. So in some senses, I shouldn't be relating that to the Neijing, but I'm going to anyway, because there's a beautiful quote in the Neijing, because the Neijing has the same logic, okay? The Neijing, Qi said, as long as the thick congee can enter the stomach, the diarrhea will stop and those with vacuities or deficiencies will live. As long as the body can sweat and both bowels are free-flowing, those with repletions will live, or excesses will live. This is a very, very profound statement. What it's effectively saying is, the first bit is, look, if you can eat something and the body can actually do something with it and absorb the good stuff within what you eat, right, the fluid and grains, then if you're deficient, you're not going to die, right? And we know that. We know people with very poor digestion and all the problems that they have, right? Or they're not able to absorb things. A good example is someone who is constantly thirsty, but they drink and they immediately go to urinate, right? It's kind of this idea that something's just, and it might be very dry, that something just goes straight through. And the second sentence is very key. As long as the body can sweat and both bowels, that means defecation, urination, are free flowing, those with excesses will live. And let me illuminate that a little bit more. But what you've really got here is 4 things. So the first one I might call ability to absorb, or absorption in Western science, but in Chinese we call it yunhua, don't we? We call it transformation and transportation. You put something in the stomach and then the body does something with it, makes it into something good, eliminates everything else. The second one is a regulated exterior, right? So if the exterior can be regulated, then you're in good health. If the bowels can be regulated, the stools can be regulated, then you're in good health. And if the urination can be regulated, you're in good health. If these 4 things are regular, the person has a good chance of getting better or of surviving, particularly, for example, if they have something like COVID or some serious disease. And why is that? So I'm going to answer the question of why these 4 things are really, really important. This is, on the right is a diagram by a physician from the Qing dynasty named Fang Youzhi. I am going to say a horribly simplified version of summary of Volker Scheid's amazing research and insight on this. I will never be able to write as well as Volker. So if you want to read Volker in his own words, I really recommend the article that he wrote on the left, which kind of brings these ideas out. But one of the things that Volker realized is that, there's all these discussions between different schools of herbal medicine, lots of different arguments over the centuries. But what he found is that there was a physician in the Qing dynasty called Fang Youzhi who was trying to find a way to see, well, what is in common with all these different styles? And he made this representation on the right. And what you're seeing here is around, if you see the head at the top here, or the neck, and in the middle, you have the organs, kind of a line going through the middle, all the way from the mouth, all the way down to through the stomach, to the intestines, to the other end. Okay. That would be an idea of the interior. And around the outside, we have this kind of double line here. And that is the muscle layer, and outside of that is the exterior. So this is an idea of exterior versus interior. So it's a bit different from some of the diagrams you may have seen before. Now, if I'm going to simplify that to the kind of the most extreme extent, it would look like this. Okay. So what you have is the middle line is the interior. In a very crude way, it's the GI tract. It's from your mouth all the way to the other end. That's the interior. Okay. So this is just one way. It's not a definitive way, but it's just one way of looking at exterior versus interior. And the exterior is the line around the outside. And a very, very crude, but simple, but also reasonably true way to unify a lot of herbal medicine thinking from all different schools is that if it's in the exterior bit, you take it out through the exterior. That means kind of promoting a sweat or facilitating it to go out through the exterior. And if it's in the interior, if it's in the GI tract, then you take it out through the bowels or through urination. So what does that mean in practice? Well, if you've got something which is clearly an exterior condition, and we'll kind of define that a bit later, how we define interior versus exterior. But you know, muscle aches and pains came from a wind cold invasion. Now you're kind of like sensitive to wind, and you got a floating pulse. Well, it wouldn't make much sense to take that pathogen all the way through the body, all the way to the other side. And the danger is if you do that, you kind of trap it inside. So what you want to do is just figure out, why is the body not sweating? Why is the body not, or not doing an effective sweat, and correct that. Now, it might be that the exterior is trapped, so we have to just release it. It might be there's not enough yang qi, so we have to warm it. It might be that there's not enough fluid, so there's enough yang, but there's not enough fluid, so we have to put more fluid in somehow, you know, and release it that way. So there's many, many different possibilities of what can go wrong with the exterior. The interior, really, we're talking about now the most clear version of that would be constipation, for example, right? So because if heat goes inside or the heat response gets too much, it dries out the stool, and now you're blocked, and now you have to take it out that way. If you're constipated, you're not going to be looking towards the exterior to clear the constipation in general, right? So there's this kind of differential here, right? And of course, it's a lot more sophisticated than that, but it's also very profound, because this is something that is very unifying. It's the ground which connects many different herbal styles, but it tends to be that all of the different herbal thinkers will still have this framework in mind, and it can absolutely be applied to acupuncture, and it's there with it. As I said, I showed you the Neijing, which is a bit more acupuncture focused. It's there in that quote from the Neijing. So again, but why is this so key to health in general? So it's this. This is how I explain it to the public. So I put it in the most simple language possible. The body needs to continually adjust to maintain a balance between extremes of temperature, heat and cold, on the one hand, and fluid balance, dampness and dryness, on the other. If the body can take in and absorb new fluids and nutrition, if it can sweat appropriately, and the stools and urination can move appropriately, you can readjust. Because these are the four main methods. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about Western or Chinese medicine, the four main methods we regulate our temperature and fluid balance: through sweat, through stools, through urination, and through the absorbing of new fluid and nutrition, right? And this simple principle is an amazing little principle to guide you. It's so obvious we kind of miss it. But what it means is that when we have a patient thinking about this, we can always just look at them and say, well, look, how are they able to sweat? Are they able to regulate their exterior? Are they able to have a regular bowel movement, not too loose, not too dry? Are they able to, have they got inhibited urination or frequent urination, for example? And can they take and absorb new fluids and nutrition? Now, in our 10 questions, those all come up, but now you're seeing that these are actually super important because they are the fundamentals. So what you'll see in herbal theory, particularly when it comes to treating, even very serious diseases, and herbal theory developed in response to epidemics. And a lot of people say, oh, does herbs or Chinese medicine treat epidemics? And well, actually the answer is, no, that's what it was designed to do. Like that's how it developed. Every time there was a big epidemic, there would be massive advances in herbal medicine. So epidemics is Chinese medicine, right? And so, when it comes to figuring out, to helping someone survive a bout of something very severe, like COVID, for example, this applies too. So if they can take and absorb new fluids and nutrition, if they can sweat appropriately, if stools and urination can move appropriately, you can readjust. So you can do a huge amount for somebody to get those regular, and then the body will actually be able to survive. That's one way to look at it. So this is so important, and that this is actually the way that the Treatise on Cold Damage, which again, if you don't know, that is the main text. That's the Bible of herbal medicine, where the Neijing is kind of the Bible of acupuncture and Chinese medicine in general. The Treatise on Cold Damage, the Shanghan Lun, is the Bible of herbal medicine. And the herbal Shanghan Lun is structured in that way. And it's structured in that way with this kind of sweating, kind of bowels and urination, and that's an exterior interior. Now, since I think it's the Ming or Qing dynasty, when there are these books called Materia Medica, which list all the herbs, they actually structure them according to that framework. So at the first herbs are sweating herbs, right? And that's exterior releasing herbs, which herbs make you sweat. So exterior is number one. Exterior, and then after that, you have things to eliminate things from the gastrointestinal tract. So vomiting formulas, and that sounds very nice. We don't use vomiting formulas so much nowadays, but that's one way of eliminating something from the digestive GI tract, or draining downwards. And then the last one is harmonizing. So really that's exterior. The sweating is exterior. Vomiting and draining downwards is when it's interior. And then harmonizing is when it's not interior, not exterior. We're not going to go into that today, but it's referred to as a Xiaoyang. People have different conceptions of it. But there's an idea that things can get trapped inside, they can get trapped on the exterior, and they can get trapped in the not interior, not exterior zone. But it's so important. That's actually how herbs are structured. Now, when we come back to this, you realize that these four things are the things that help us to readjust. So I've already answered this question. What comes first in the Shanghan Lun and in Materia Medica and in formularies? It's always the releasing the exterior category. So if we think releasing the exterior is a footnote, well, in a herbal textbook, it's number one. That if you open up your herb textbook and read it A to Z, you're going to go through all the exterior releasing formulas and herbs first. And just an interesting point, and again, coming back to my journey a little bit, I love these books, but they didn't make any sense to me for a very long time. I don't know if you've come across these. You put it into the chat if you've come across these books before. They're Bob Flaws's books called Sticking to the Point. Volume 1 has just a lot of really useful lists, and it actually lists huge number of treatment principles, which you don't really get for acupuncture, you don't get in a lot of other books. And I just thought they were really, really fantastic. And then volume 2 is formulas for acupuncture. And I'm thinking, oh, that's really interesting. I want to know formulas for acupuncture. And but then when I opened it, the language and the things that it was saying it was doing were really unfamiliar to me after I did my acupuncture course. and I wasn't really able to use it. And since I've done the herbs and I come back to it, oh, I realize what it's saying. And by the way, none of this is to say that you need herbs to do acupuncture, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that because there are loads of styles that don't work in that way or reference that way. But what I am saying is just if there are some things that are unclear, this can help make them a little bit clearer. And you'll be able to take this away today. So we're going to come back to the formulas later. One of the reasons that of this book is that it's actually, I think that it's using some herbal thinking with formulas of acupuncture points. But these are classic point formulas. And so, yeah, we'll come back and have a look at that later. But one of the interesting things is if you look at the contents page, there is some kind of relationship to this sequence of treatment principles from herbs and to the way this book is structured. It's not one-to-one, and acupuncture is different from herbs. We do things in acupuncture you can't do in herbs, and we do things in herbs you can't quite do in acupuncture, but they're working on the same system. What I mean, no, let's put it another way. I think you can achieve potentially a lot of the same things in acupuncture and herbs, but the way you do them is a bit different. So you can't have exact one-to-one treatment principles. However, a lot of the treatment principles you can have one-to-one. Okay, so let's go to the Shanghanlen. So we are going to look at now the this kind of Bible of herbal medicine and some quotes from it to figure out a bit more about the exterior. So this is a whistle-stop tour. It takes a good amount of study to understand this text. So I'm giving you a flavor today, but you should hopefully it should give you some some food for thought. And this is a very defining line here where it says that Tai Yang illness, and here it's really talking about an exterior condition, is really defined by a floating pulse, head and neck pain, and aversion to cold. Well, we can say aversion to cold or wind. But what the Shanghanlen is doing here is really, it's not giving you part of random symptoms. It's saying these ones are very key. These ones should really give you a kind of an idea that you might be working with a problem in the exterior. So, of course, a floating pulse means that the chi is going to be towards the exterior. So there's something going on there, right? It's not going to be all floating pulses, right? But if we know the chi is at the exterior, if the pulse is floating. Head and neck pain, right? Well, we've already explained that. It's the yang part of the body. And aversion to cold, right? So there's something, aversion to cold and aversion to wind, they're not definitive. They're not definitive, but they're a pretty good indication that something is in the exterior, and now that sensitivity is showing us that we need to think about exterior conditions. So, obviously in TCM we can talk about wind cold invasion. It's not one-to-one here, but it's in the range. It's in that range definitely when we talk about wind cold. Now, again, I'm not going into a lot of detail with this, but I just want to give you an idea that there are many, many ways to release the exterior, many, many kinds of exterior conditions. And this is something that is talked about ad infinitum in herbal medicine, and then you can have this very, very nuanced differentials, which leads you different strategies and formulas working with the exterior. But I'm going to give you some of those today that you can use with food strategies too. So, one of the main differentials, or one of the most important differentials when we're talking about the exterior from herbal medicine, is whether it is a wind strike illness or a cold damage illness. Now, the big difference here is sweating or not sweating. So on the left, the wind strike illness, you have sweating, aversion to wind, and a relaxed pulse. And on the right, you have aversion to cold, tight pulse, and no sweat. Very quick summary again. Apologies to any teachers who really understand all this stuff, because I'm going to talk about it in a very basic way, but I just want to give you an idea of these kind of differentials. With the one on the left, the solely or something is open, but really the issue here is that some of the language they use is that the troops are disordered. So if you imagine that you have the fluids at the exterior and you have the warmth, and the fluids would be like the yin qi and the neutral qi, and the warmth will be the wei qi, right, the protective qi. Well, they're disordered here, and we're not going to treat this by strongly sweating. We treat it by creating a bit more order at the exterior, and we'll show you how to do that in a moment. On the right one, what you have is that the soli are completely closed, and cold, the invasion of cold has closed the pores, and the cold is fettered on the interior now, fettered on the interior of the exterior. And because of that, you need something quite strong to open, to have the force to open up and scatter that cold, push it out. And why is one a relaxed pulse, one's a tight pulse? Well, it's very clever. If something's open, there's less pressure in there. If something's open and flowing out, you're not going to feel something, you know, banging against the outside of the exterior, and therefore you feel it's relaxed in the vessel. However, if something's closed and now there's a lot of pressure inside kind of pushing to get out, then you get it tight. So that's that relaxed versus tight, but they're both floating. They're both floating. So question you can put in the chat, get a little bit of interaction here. What makes you sweat? What flavor makes you sweat? You have some answers. Isn't it a fairly obvious one? I don't know if the chat's available to everyone, is it? Okay, pungent, thank you. Okay, so pretty easy one there. We all know if it's something spicy soup or something will make you sweat. So we're going to use spicy herbs, and on the left we use cinnamon, and on the right we use ephedra or ma huang. Ma huang is actually a restricted herb, although you know we can think of other strategies to use with ma huang. But this is the differential here. And just in terms of symptoms, the one on the left will be headache, fever, sweat, aversion to wind. And on the right, headache, fever, body aches, lower back pain, joint pain, absence of sweat, and wheezing. Body aches here, or whole body aches, because the more trapped it is, the more, firstly, cold contracts. So cold, when it's more cold than wind, cold contracts, but also the more trapped it is, the more generalized body aches you can have. And the wheezing, it can be that really now this is something that can start to affect the lung because the cold has really been so fettered on the inside. Okay, so again, I'm trying to give you some ideas about this. It's a lot of nuance about it, just to show you some of the nuance. That this differential then, differentiating between these two different kinds of exterior conditions, we can then, in the Shanghan Lun and later on, you then have many sub-formulas for each strategy, whether it's the first pattern, the Guizhou pattern, or the second pattern, the Ma Huang pattern. The Guizhou is cinnamon, Ma Huang is ephedra. Just to give you an idea, this is a book of families of formulas that derive from either Guizhou Tang, the cinnamon decoction, or Ma Huang Tang, ephedra decoction. So you can see how many they are. And this is not an exhaustive list. Each one of these lines is a different formula, and you can now see the kind of nuance, and this is just treating the exterior. These are all things that are going to be understanding how to treat the exterior. So there's this kind of wonderful nuance that you can bring in to the different ways the exterior can go wrong and how to model that. So we've gone through a lot of things. So what have we learned so far? Pain, headache, aversion to wind and cold, and floating pulse all give us an idea that exterior conditions might be present. There are multiple and nuanced approaches to diagnosing different exterior conditions, and there are different treatment strategies. Elsewhere in the Shanghan Lun, you have things which are more on the wind damp side and wind water side. And later in history, you have wind heat and wind dryness. As I say, I don't want to pretend that everyone agrees with each other within herbal medicine, but this is kind of like how people would characterize it in their own schools. And also, you can be sweating and still have an unreleased exterior, the Guai-Jia-Tang. This is disordered yin and wei. So, okay, let's come on to to understanding what I mentioned about the exterior release chain, and then I'm going to give you some recipes that you can try at home. So, what I mentioned is there has to be a lot of things have to happen for an effective release of the exterior. So, if we start from the center of the diagram on the right, well, you have to be able to, you have to have food and water. You have to have qi on the inside. And there has to be a source of qi. Food and water give you a source of qi, and they also give you a source of fluids to be able to create this steam, to push out, open, and to come back down again. So we need the resources to begin with. So, you know, we could talk about tonification, but we can think even simpler than that. Well, you need to have some water, right? You need to drink some water, and you need to have some nutrition, right? And from that, if the body can absorb it and transform it, it can create this kind of dynamic physiological qi and fluids called the nutritive qi. And from that center, then, the next function is that it needs to be able to be steamed out. So it's no good if we make it and it just sits there in the middle, right? If it sits there in the middle, you know, what do we feel? We feel kind of bloated and stuck, right, when we eat. So we need something to steam it out from the center to the exterior. And then we need the pores to open. It's no good if we steam it out and the pores stay closed. That's just going to, you know, create more pressure, you know, in the system. But if the pores open, we also need a sweat to come out, right? So it needs to open and something needs to be pushed out. So can you see these are all little stages that must happen for the exterior to be released? If one of them's missing, then what are we going to do? Now, this is the beauty of herbal medicine now. And people, you know, it's one of the wonderful things is this formula, Guai-Jia-Tang, is certainly one of the most, if not the most important formula in Chinese medicine. And now you can see how it beautifully maps onto these aspects of the kind of what we call the exterior release chain. That in the center, you have, you actually have a food in this formula in the form of Chinese red date. It's a food. You could just eat it. It's and it tonifies qi and fluids. It's sweet and warm. It's quite sticky. So it's something substantial in there. And then we also have honey-coated licorice, also sweet, and also licorice itself is sweet, also boosts qi and fluids. So we have this kind of foodie thing in the middle of it, right? And both of those, with their properties, also stimulate the spleen qi to be able to transform something into the nutritive qi, into something. So these two help to put something in that can be steamed out, create the fluids, but then also create the nutritive qi. And they go really, really well with the fresh ginger. So the fresh ginger, is kind of the thing that connects everything, because the fresh ginger warms the stomach so it can be transformed. So it helps to create the fluids. But the fresh ginger also is spicy. So it pushes the fluids out from the center to the extremities and to the exterior. It also is spicy, so it opens the pores. It's also spicy, so it creates a slight sweat. It works with cinnamon. Cinnamon and fresh ginger together really work to open the pores together. So when they, cinnamon, remember cinnamon twig? Remember twig means limb? So it is, by its nature, it goes to the exterior. And so cinnamon, the nature of this herb is something that creates like a nice, smooth, warm flow around the exterior. Some people say it goes right into the blood vessels and orders all of this. Now, all of that is great. We've got enough stuff to go in there, and we've got enough power to push it out and open the pores. However, if remember, this person's already been sweating, so they might be a bit fluid deficient. And if we just too strongly push out all of those fluids, they could just go into a cycle where they sweat and then become dry, lose chi, sweat more, become drier, lose chi. They can go into a spiral. So this is the beauty of Chinese medicine. They put something sour, bitter, and cool in there. It's called Bai Xiao Yao, or peony root. And this sour things help to close the pores or close the stoli. So now you've got something that is sour and cool and something that's spicy and warm. And that's going to enhance both of the functions, the opening function and the closing function. But it's even cleverer than that, because by the way, there's a million ways to explain this formula, and I've heard so many, and each time it's great. It's another way of thinking about it. The sourness and the coolness of the peony root gathers the fluids at the exterior, so that, because remember, this is a disordered exterior. The fluids are in one place, the yang's in the other. You know, some people say the yang's more outside than the fluids. It's got no ability to actually get under the fluids and push them out. So here the sour brings everything together. So now you can properly push it out, right? There are a number of things, and these are all true at the same time. These are all things that are happening at the same time. Guizhi is a formula that, another amazing thing about it is you can take it really when you're healthy, and we put cinnamon in our food, we put ginger in our food, we put red date in our food, we have licorice tea, right? So these are all things that they're on the food end. So it's a very, generally a very safe formula. Generally, I'm not saying that you can use it in every situation, but it's also incredibly effective. And I'm going to talk about a couple of cases where I used it and got dramatic results. But a couple of things. There are 3 other ingredients, because in the Shanghan Learn, it's not just these ingredients. It is, firstly, hot water. So when you make a decoction of herbs, you use water, and we need the water, right? So it's not just the herbs, we're not just eating the herbs. The water is going to put fluids in to steam out. Secondly, in the text, it says you should have rice congee with this. Rice congee is water, is rice with cooked in a lot of water. So it's kind of it's food, but in a water base, right? It's very acceptable by the stomach as well. So you're putting in the nutrition as well as, it's not just licorice root and red date. And the third one is wrap up in a blanket to actually create, enable the body temperature to come up to actually have that sweat. They call it a shiver sweat. So it's quite interesting that, we have to look things in the global way, not just in terms of the modalities we practice, just how can we make these things effective? Now, in practice, Guizhi Tang without those 3 things does work. However, I have had a situation when I took Guizhi Tang myself, and I was like, oh, nothing happened. And then I had a bit to eat, and then I had the sweat. So it didn't happen until actually I put food in my body. Very interesting. And they all lead to a shiver sweat. Okay, so how can we do this with food? Well, this is the exterior release chain. We've got something warming to stoke the fire, something wet to replenish water in the pot. We've got sweet things to boost spleen qi, and spicy foods to encourage the foods to steam the exterior. Well, who has ginger, honey, and lemon when they have a cold? Isn't that so? The things that the more exotic things that we might not have are peony root and licorice root. Peony root sour and cool, licorice root sweet, but it's honey coated licorice. So why don't we just use the honey and a bit of lemon? And now we've got Guizhi Tang. And as I say, we use ginger, honey, lemon for colds, and we wonder why it works. It's Guizhi Tang. So this is one of the most simple ways you can make Guizhi Tang. It's not exactly the same, of course. We're not using licorice, we're not using the peony root, but there's something in it which is the same. It's similar flavors. And then have some congee or something to eat. So a couple of examples is that I had one patient. This was early on before I knew any of this, when I was an early herbalist. And I had a patient who was coming for shoulder pain, and I gave her a formula, beautiful blood stasis formula, because I thought pain, blood stasis. Well, did nothing. Then she got a cold. And so I gave her Guai. Her cold didn't get better, but her shoulder got better. So, and then I realized, I was like, wow, that's weird. Because Guai is exterior releasing formula. Why is it treating pain? Well, exterior conditions, pain, so you don't have to have a cold for it to be an exterior condition. I once got a book which is treating pain with acupuncture and herbs. And all of a whole big proportion of the herbal formulas for treating pain were exterior releasing formulas. And I'm like, what? Why is that? Why? I thought you'd have blood stasis formulas and things like that. No. Exterior approaches are fantastic for treating pain, and we'll come on to that a bit later. Another example is I use Guai, but with a couple of gentle cooling herbs and a couple of herbs to promote urination when to regularize the urination. When I had a patient who had a facial rash, but she also had that thing of frequent thirst and frequent urination. Guai plus this a few herbs for urination and a couple of slightly more cooling ones. But overall, the formula was fairly warming, fairly exterior releasing. She treating a red facial rash, and it completely cleared up. So as you can see here, even though we're using what seems like a mostly warming strategy, if it is an exterior condition, if it is a disordered exterior condition, then that's the right thing to do. You need to help the exterior have its proper release. We all actually are releasing the exterior with acupuncture and massage, because I mean, a lot of us use these oils, right? Woodlock oil. The base of woodlock oil is camphor, which is hot and aromatic or hot and spicy, and menthol is cool and aromatic, cool and spicy. The reasons why we use those is aromatics move qi and blood, but spiciness releases. So what you'll see in almost all of these oils, the base is always camphor and menthol, and it's there because it when we put it on the exterior of the skin, it actually enables that exterior release. So we're releasing the exterior all the time. By the way, camphor and menthol is obviously Chinese, and it was the base that deep heat was derived from. So deep heat is a Chinese form of deep heat. Is a kind of a Western pharmaceutical version of our woodlock oil. And I had a lot of experience of these things in Taiwan. I'll talk about acupressure a little bit later, but there's a way of sequencing your acupuncture points to maximize the exterior releasing effect. You can use herbal baths. My teacher made herbal bath salts to help circulate and release the exterior. There was a time once I was in Taiwan, and the weather was very kind of muggy. And in Chinese, when they say muggy weather, they use this character on the right, men. And you can see the character has got two doors above a heart. So it's like the doors are closed around a heart. So men or muggy is also the character we use when we say, you know, this symptom oppression in the chest, right? Doors closed around the heart. So I was feeling really kind of odd and uncomfortable, and I was feeling that men kind of oppression with this muggy weather. And I had a spicy lamb soup because I just wanted spicy lamb soup, and everything cleared. So we're going back to that simple picture. The fluids, something warm that can help the steaming out, something nutritious like the lamb, and something spicy. Is that not another form of Guai? Can we not see Guai everywhere now, right? And that was enough to clear things for me. That was enough for an exterior release. In Taiwan, it's a damp, hot climate, but everyone's going in and out of aircon the whole time. So people are constantly getting these wind cold invasions because you're going through aircon. And so it's very, very common. That's what you see in the clinic over there. We see different things in different areas. So don't think that wind cold is just for cold climates. People with aircon, they get it all the time. And my teacher's cooking. So one of the things I noticed with my teacher's cooking, this is a picture of the table. You know, he's a phenomenal chef. He whipped this up in half an hour. I have no idea how, I still can't do this number of things in half an hour, but he's phenomenal. Every day he's kind of putting the exterior release chain in all the dishes. So some days it will be more on the nutritional side, like more kind of substantial, but you always have a soup in traditional Chinese cooking. And that soup is there to regularize your exterior as well as your interior. And, you know, when he could see that it was a new kind of weather front coming in, Taiwan has quite extreme typhoons, the food would get spicier very often because he'd be releasing everyone's exterior, making them nice and open and free before the new climatic thing came in. So there's an idea that we can do this regularly. We can do it through acupressure. We can do it through food. We can do it through Qigong. We can do it through herbal baths and exterior creams and oils and things like that. And exercise, like actually aerobic exercise, it gets underemphasized in Chinese medicine. But, you know, just as a story after recovery for COVID, I don't think my exterior properly released the stuff that was all trapped in there. I took herbs, they really helped. But until I actually went walking in hills in the south of Spain and really just got my heart pumping, you know, with that aerobic exercise. So we shouldn't diminish aerobic exercise, because just, you know, we emphasize the other side of it because people don't do enough of the mind-body exercise. But, you know, aerobic exercise is important. You know, just as a quick note, in the RCHM conference this year, we're going to have exterior as a theme. And we're going to have some Qigong, we're going to have some Tui Na there. We're going to have maybe some exterior creams and oils. We're going to be talking about skin. So it's not just herbs. We're going to be kind of looking at the exterior all the way through in a practical way. So if you're interested in kind of furthering your understanding of this, BXE members are welcome. And there's a BXE discount as well. So you see, if you want to, I'll tell you how to get to know about that at the end. So here's Guizhi. Here's the exterior release chain. But we can also do it with hot sour soup for time, because I don't want to overrun too much. You're going to get these in the notes, right? So they'll be these will be available afterwards. So this is a brilliant, delicious recipe. Really recommend it. And every time I've cooked this for a class, people have an experience with this dish. They have an exterior releasing experience. It's delicious, but you have an experience. So you want an experience, make this dish. I have to credit Fuchsia Dunlop, who's a fantastic chef. Really recommend her book, Every Grain of Rice. It's the Bible of Chinese cooking, right? Get that book if you're interested in Chinese cooking. But here's the recipe from her. I really recommend it. And again, I won't go through this, but this is very similar to Guizhi. The difference is that it's salty rather than sweet. Okay, but you've still got the ginger, you've still got the spicy things like white pepper, which would be like the substitute for cinnamon maybe, or something like that, spring onion, and you got the sourness of the vinegar rather than the peony root. So again, you know, look how versatile it is. But this is a dynamic kind of dietary therapy, right? This is not the put X in and this will you know, tonify X. This is, let's put things together dynamically, just like herbal medicine, and create a fantastic effect, right? So I already mentioned the ginger, honey, lemon. And very simply, a ginger and spring onion tea is actually a formula. And if it's for early cold. So if you feel a cold coming on, have some ginger and spring onion in a tea. Very simple, fresh ginger, spring onion. When you're releasing the exterior, by the way, important to use fresh ginger rather than ginger powder. Ginger powder will warm the interior more. Fresh ginger will actually have that release. So fresh ginger is important. Another one here, again, you'll get this in the notes, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much, is a sweet warm congee with cinnamon powder. The more heavy nutrition you put in the food, I think the more it slightly weighs it down, it's less rapid than just a soup. If it's a soup, it's kind of a much more rapid pushing outwards. Whereas here, this will be a slow, warm exterior release, but with more nutrition inside. It's also delicious. That's the sweet, warm congee. Again, you can map it onto this picture. So what we're aiming for is a kind of a glow from inside to outside. And we can now kind of think about this, if there are any Qigong practitioners here, this is what we're aiming for in Qigong. On the picture on the left, we're aiming to create this nice interior warmth, which spreads out nice and evenly across the body and protects us year round. If we need to sweat to bring the temperature down, things open up and sweat very easily. If we need to close down to protect against cold weather, it happens. And that happens from having yang inside, in Qigong, that's very much in the Dantian. Now, on the right side there, you got what happens with disease. Now you have no yang in the Dantian, and it's all up in the head, right? Where is it in the exterior? So this is one way of actually mapping on China. This is what we're looking at with Chinese medicine illness very often, isn't it? Is that now we don't have the yang down in and below, and it's all up above instead. It's not anchored, it's just flooding up and out, and it's just harassing us and making us uncomfortable. So now what the lesson of this talk is that it's not only about draining that heat, clearing that heat, and anchoring back down. If you help to release the exterior, it can naturally come back down. So releasing the exterior here is a great treatment strategy. And acupressure can do it. I do acupressure I'm going to be teaching self acupressure to the public sometime this year. I haven't listed it yet. But if you're interested in finding out about that, you can drop me an email. But there's a self acupressure routine, as I mentioned, that can have a really good exterior release trigger. But when I'm teaching acupuncture to students, I often use this phrase, finding the points that are ready to go. In excess conditions, what you often find, particularly excess exterior conditions, that some points, you don't have to do any special manipulation. You just get the De Qi and bang, it opens, right? Because the pressure's already in there. You're just the pressure valve. You just put it in and release it. And so the exterior can also be seen as a regulator of internal pressure. So if it's very open, for some people, too open, they might feel very lackluster and tired. But if it's really closed, they could have high blood pressure or anger or irritability problems. So you can see an exterior is really something that can be applied to so many illnesses. But excess ones, from some perspective, I find excess ones easier to treat because all I have to do is it's ready to go. All I have to do is find the points that are ready to go, needle them or press them, and the release happens. And you literally hear the sigh of the patient going, oh, it's this pressure build up, and it's just, oh, feel something is released. In deficiency, it's difficult because you've got to put something in with acupuncture and then release it. But you can obviously still do it. And then that takes nuance. We're not going to go into that. But we're going to talk about excess conditions with acupuncture, coming back to acupuncture now. If we ask the question, which points almost always have some kind of effect? I don't know about you, but the windows of heaven very often have some kind of effect. Gallbladder 20, I don't know if you're experienced, but it's very rare that I will needle gallbladder 20 and the patient won't feel, oh, something's released, something cleared. Because as I said, the exterior can always be a bit trapped. So all of these windows of heaven tend to release pressure and release the exterior. I can't remember if D16 is actually a window of heaven, by the way, but it's in that range. They're all underneath the skull, really. They're all around the base of the skull. But what are the key ones? When we look at the classics, which ones come up again and again and again as the best ones, the ones that are ready to go almost all of the time, even in deficiency conditions, they're often ready to go. My teacher in Taiwan, anytime anyone came with the cold, he's got an assistant who will do the massage, sometimes acupuncture for him, and he'll go feng fu, facial, right? D16, gallbladder 20, bladder 13. That's the thing. If someone comes in with the cold, they're all going to get D16, gallbladder 20, bladder 13. Interestingly, the Shanghan Lun, the only acupuncture points in the whole text that mentions are D16, gallbladder 20, feng fu, feng-chi. Shanghan Lun 27, Taiyang illness, first take Guijia. However, there is vexation and no release. First needle D16 and gallbladder 20, then give Guijia again, and it will resolve. So even the Shanghan Lun is saying, look, there are times when we need a bit of acupuncture, okay? And it's feng fu, feng-chi. And then Cheng Danan, who we're going to come on to in a moment, also says feng fu, feng-chi, D16, gallbladder 20. In Bob Flaws's book here, for this kind of for Greater Tang wind strike, it's called the 2 winds formula, gallbladder 20 and D16. I'll leave these for you to read on the slides later for time, but I've actually just put in the rationale here from each of these texts. Cheng Danan, 1899 to 1957, was an acupuncturist who founded the first school of acupuncture, modern China. He wrote a commentary on the Shanghanlun with acupuncture formulas for every herbal formula and diagnostic situation, which if you can see my screen, this is the book here. And it's fascinating because I hadn't seen someone who's actually thought through acupuncture formulas for every single herbal formula. So, well, we're talking about Guizhi Tang. So what does he say about Guizhi Tang? He says, Guizhi Tang, and this is the specific instance of clause 16 of the Shanghanlun, he gives 6 points. Gallbladder 20, Du 12, bladder 12, Sanjiao 5, large intestine 4, and bladder 62. The first 3 directly cause and unblock the blood flow in the area and consequently treat muscle contraction and spasm. Gallbladder 20 is stiff neck and aversion to wind. Du 12, back, neck stiffness and fever, and bladder 12, mild upper back pain. The second 3 have 2 kinds of effects. From the meridian system, they cause and unblock blood in the stagnated area of the head pain. And number 2, they release heat from the abundance of blood in the area. So this is his way of talking. I mean, he is a bit of a modernist, so he likes to talk about things in concrete terms. But he's very important and well-regarded person. And it's just fascinating to hear somebody who's devoted their life to acupuncture. This is someone who is wanting to promote acupuncture, feeling like acupuncture has been de-emphasized. And he wanted to find acupuncture formulas equivalent to the Shanghanlun herb formulas. So there are, there aren't such things as just exterior points. All the organs and all the meridians actually play a part in that whole exterior releasing to some degree. So, I'm not going to, we're about to finish, so I'm not going to go into all sorts of depth and how you combine all these different strategies and all these different situations. I just kind of want to open your mind and give you some things you can try straight away. We can think of things in terms of the elements and how, and the organs, organs, and how they collaborate to regulate the exterior. I've put them here. And also you can look at things and break them down to great circuits, pairs of divisions. Just finally, a couple of acupuncture cases. So I had a patient who was diagnosed with early menopause in her late teens. This was in a very different time. She had a thyroid removed and she was put on thyroxine. When she came to see me, she was in her 60s. And she was the driest person I've ever met. She said that she was so dry, she would only take a shower once every month because she didn't get smelly. She wasn't smelly. Some people will say that, but she wasn't smelly. The shower would really, really dry her out. She was also quite hot and irritable. She had perpetual shoulder and neck and head pain. What was interesting was, again, I wasn't very experienced at this point, but what I did know is that liver 14 in particular had a very extreme reaction with this person. Because liver 14 is, if you think about how the liver is regulating the wind and warmth and yang that can rise up to release the exterior. There was something that led me to liver 14 with her. I did liver 14. She came back and she said, I have had the first sweat I've had in 20 years. And she was over the moon. Neck and shoulder pain had gone. So that's what you can do with acupuncture. But it's quite interesting. Again, this is certainly an exterior condition, but it was trapped here. It was just, it was fascinating. Another one, I had a patient, 16-year-old girl who possibly had COVID. And since then, foods that she used to love, like garlic bread, would make her nauseous. And her mum, who's a big foodie, was at a loss because she wouldn't eat her mum's cooking anymore. And now what was interesting was she also had headache, which also came down to the bladder channel above the eyes. And when I felt her upper back, it was really warm. And it just seemed like it was something, the exterior involvement. Now, interestingly, lung opens into the nose, but and the lung regulates the exterior. The bladder channel, which is upper back, where she had the heat, it was manifesting in pain in the bladder points over here. So there's lung and bladder. And I thought, where does lung and bladder meet? Lung and bladder meets on bladder 13. So let's do bladder 13. Bladder 7 is Tongtian. It's actually a key one for changes of smell, regulating smell in the nose. That's also on the bladder channel. I did gallbladder 20, and then I did large intestine 4 and large intestine 20 to affect the kind of the lung and into the nose. One treatment. Now, the bad news was that she really hated the treatment, and she actually burst into tears. Now, that could be a release from the lung, but it could also be, I don't know, if I was better at needling, maybe I don't know. Anyway, point is that after one treatment, the smell came back, and there was a big release, and yeah, everything normalized again. So that was just a nice, neat little thing with an exterior involvement with something a little bit unusual. So, okay, we're coming to the end now, and sorry, we've overrun a little bit, but we're almost there. So what's the conclusion here? Well, firstly, the exterior can affect any problem, but colds, flus, pain, and skin conditions very often have exterior involvement. Not always, but you're thinking along those lines. The exterior is probably a bit trapped in everyone, so you can release it regularly, and in yourself too. Remember the exterior release chain. Again, you can get these notes. They'll be appended to the video. This will be a permanent video in the member section, but I think they might also be sent around. And you can play around with it, right? So I've shown you how dynamic it is. You get a bit of water, a bit of food, something a little bit spicy, and then just see how it goes. So there's a hot sour soup recipe, cinnamon ginger congee recipe, and choosing points that are ready to go, right, on our patients to help that release of the exterior. So thanks everyone for listening. I hope that really gives you a flavor, no pun intended, of the different thinking that herbal medicine can bring. If you are interested in doing herbs at all, I really recommend coming to our next webinar, which is Wednesday, March 29th, where you're going to hear really what the life of a herbalist is like. It may just be interesting to you to know from 4 different people. We have different perspectives on things, what doing herbs is like, but also it's important because there's lots of things that you might later realize while doing herbs, and it's good to kind of get in the right direction to begin with. So we'll give you, to our best of our ability, some knowledge about that. As I mentioned, the RCHM is a very allied organization with the BACC. And so we do recommend, if you're doing herbs, that you do training at one of our colleges to get into the RCHM. There are many benefits, but the main thing we would say is that our herbs courses actually help you be able to practice once you upon graduation. And then after that, within the RCHM, there's continued support. We're going to talk a lot more about this next time, so I won't go through it in detail, but you get a lot of membership benefits from being RCHM member as well, including the community that we bring. And again, we'll give you a flavor of that next week. CPD and resources to help you practice safely and legally, and continued support as well. I say we'll talk about this a bit more next time. But just to finish, we have a mailing list from the RCHM for everybody. And on that list, we actually give out free things from time to time, free articles from our journal, discounts to events, invites to free webinars and things. And this, you can kind of keep in the loop of what's happening in the RCHM. If this is something that interests you and you can benefit from some of these things, what you can do is just drop your email in the chat with your name, and we'll add you to the list. And I'll just save the chat afterwards, and we'll put you on the mailing list. If you want to decide to do this later, or if you're watching the video, you can just drop a line to our office at office@rchm.co.uk. And you can also like our Facebook page as well, and that will keep you up to date with things that are going on. And if there's anything that you want to discuss about herbal medicine, we are always more than happy to chat. So you can either chat with me, you can drop me a line at alex@downmedicine.com, or if you want to ask me any questions about anything we talked about today, and also Helen as well at communications@rchm.co.uk. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. So I will stop sharing, and we can open it out to questions. There are some, I think, already in the chat. So I'll go through some of them in the chat. You can either put them in the chat, or you could put your hand up, I think, on the participants tab. Can you do that? Put your, or it's, oh no, on the reactions tab, though, isn't it? When you can raise your hand in reactions and you can unmute and ask them. So I'll go through some of them in the chat. So Juliet asks, I have pucker licorice tea bags at home. Would there be enough licorice in them to be a medicinal dose? Interestingly, not to brag, but the founder of Pucker Herbs is actually Sebastian Pohl, is actually one of the RCHM members. And I'm not going to give preferential treatment to anyone, but I do think Pucker Herbs are pretty good quality. Actually, I've used them myself. I recommend them to my patients. Enough in them to be a medicinal dose? Maybe not, and they're not honey coated either, which are the key ones that we use quite often in releasing the exterior. They have enough to have a therapeutic dose, put it that way. If for a medical dose, maybe, but certainly a therapeutic dose. And so I do recommend, just generally, if someone has pain, which has got some relationship to the exterior and cold, just cinnamon by itself actually is fantastic for pain. What vinegar could you use instead of Qingqiang vinegar? Well, that's a good question. Having taught this many times, I've had people using all kinds of different vinegars in that recipe, and they all seem to work with different flavors. So just play around with it. Use something that you wouldn't mind drinking. But I have used balsamic. I've used white wine vinegar, red wine vinegar. There's been a whole pile of different ones. What was the name of the book that was recommended? I will put it in the chat, but it is Every Grain of Rice by Fuchsia Dunlop. It's absolutely the best Chinese cookbook that you can get. It is brilliant because it's everyday Chinese cooking. And actually, funnily enough, many of the recipes are very, very well tuned to Chinese medicine principles. I know that she doesn't know about Chinese medicine, but when you cook Chinese food correctly, it actually does tend to conform to Chinese medicine principles. Helen asks, is the sweet warm congee, in the sweet warm congee, is the cinnamon powder rogue there more to warm the yang as an agent to assist in the exterior release chain, not using guaja twig, cinnamon twig for the exterior directly? Really good question. And again, we could go on for hours about debating this one, because some people think, so the question is you've got cinnamon twig and cinnamon bark, and the accepted theory, the general theory is cinnamon bark warms the interior. It warms our trunk, the trunk of our tree, right? And cinnamon twig goes to our twigs, goes to our branches and warms the exterior. Now, there are some people who argue that in the Shanghan Lun 2,000 years ago, what they were actually using was cinnamon bark, rogue in the first place. So actually, there's a debate, and some practitioners, very classical ones, will use the cinnamon bark to release. So there's a discussion. I think the main thing is you try it. Go ahead, try the two types. Now, our question is the cinnamon that you get in the supermarket, those little twigs, what is that? I do think that, well, firstly, different brands have different warming capabilities. And there was a test done by a YouTube channel called America's Test Kitchen. And they tested the warming aspect of different brands of cinnamon. And they found that there were some brands that didn't have any warming at all. So again, this is one you're going to have to try. I do know that Pucker have sourced their herbs very well. So, that's one. If you want a good cinnamon, their 3 cinnamon's pretty good. So that's kind of a detailed answer. So you don't really know the culinary stuff. You just have to try it. And I don't know whether it's twig or bark. Someone told me it's something completely different entirely. It's culinary cinnamon, which is a bit different. Jennifer says, I have noticed in myself and my children when we're ill that we only break a sweat when we've fallen asleep. It can be in the daytime and not necessarily night. Why would that be? Interesting one. I mean, I could say that, okay, well, what about this? I mean, it could be lots of different reasons. But remember the blanket that you have to wrap yourself up in to get the proper shiver sweat from a Tang formula? Well, maybe it's that your body temperature can actually only, when you sleep, the Wei Qi goes on the inside. And that means that it's possible that maybe your body temperature can only get up to the proper temperature when you stop for a moment and allow things to go on the inside. Maybe things are too scattered after that. That would be one theory. Without kind of doing a diagnosis, I couldn't figure it out definitively, but that's what I'm thinking first. But this is a fascinating thing that it always surprises me, the exceptional cases. I see so many different kind of situations. So I had one patient, for example, who had she had a lot of head stuff, which I managed to successfully treat with exterior releasing formulas. But she was left with some skin rashes. And again, it was still an unresolved exterior. And I gave her very powerful herbs to release the exterior. Nothing happened. I was like, what's going on? And then she was Malaysian. She went to Malaysia, which is a hot, damp climate. And she said when she arrived, she got out of the plane, she sweated for 3 days and the skin condition disappeared. So it was like the right circumstances had to happen. And maybe, I prepared the ground with the exterior releasing formulas. And then, just like I had to eat something before I had my sweat, she had to go to Malaysia before she had her sweat, right? But, this is all kind of, it's all fascinating. That's where we can all learn from each other. And then, is there an acceptable vegan alternative to honey? So every time we substitute something, it's slightly different. However, what's really nice about herbal medicine and dietary therapy is we can go back to flavors. So technically, anything sweet, so there are dietary therapy dishes, for example, which use just rock sugar, right? Which is just, not, I say honey because, I get the feeling it's slightly, it's got more health properties than just sugar, right? But sugar is often used in therapies. I mean, there's also malt extract. Is that vegan? Malt extract, that's often, that's used in a famous formula as well. Etang, maltose or molasses. Molasses are vegan, right? Aren't they? Is that right? I'm pretty sure. I think that's the last question in the chat. So is there anyone who wants to ask a question either in the chat or verbally? Okay. Well, it's been a really great pleasure to do this today. As I say, on next Wednesday, March 29th, if you're interested in herbs, or if you're just interested in, the other part of the community. I mean, one of the really nice things, as I say, is the RCHM is a part of the BXE community. Half of us are members, and we're kind of, we're here in the corner, and sometimes we kind of we don't often share our experiences. But I can only speak for myself. I'm very much a member of the BXE. I love being in the BXE. I love this community, love all the people. And it's a real pleasure to kind of talk to people. So even if you're not interested in herbs as a career, you might want to just connect with us and hear what we've been, our perspective on what we've been up to. So I hope you come along next Wednesday. As I say, if you want to any benefit from any of some future kind of free webinars or articles from our journal, discounts to events, you want to hear about our conference as well that's coming up in June, when we're going to be talking more about the exterior with lots of experiential stuff, just drop your email in the chat. Otherwise, hope to see you next week or just another BXE event.